Welcome back, friends. Today we're going to work on the Stanley Way XJ again, and we're going to replace one of the biggest offenders of death wobble, and that is your track bar. If your track bar bushings are worn out or out of position, then it can definitely cause death wobble. So what I'm going to be doing is installing a rough country track bar. This has an adjustment on it where you can make the track bar longer or shorter depending on if it's stock configuration or if you have a lift like I do to properly center the axle. It's got brand new bushings on both ends. It's heavy duty, a lot bigger and stronger than the old one. So hopefully this will help me with my death wobble. Let's get started. Oh, and I forgot to tell you, it also comes with a new bracket. This attaches to the frame. The frame end of the sway bar will connect here, the other end will go to the axle. If you watch the video where I put the lift on this Jeep, you'll see that I had to disconnect the track bar here at the axle so that I had more ability to move the axle down, put the new springs on. So all I did was zip tie this in place. I knew I wasn't going to drive it, so I just zip tied it to keep it out of place. That's where it attaches with this bolt and a little flag nut back there in the back, all the way up to the frame side up here. And that's a bad sign. They got a bolt where the grease fitting should be. Yep, it's pretty empty of grease. And then there's the bracket we're going to replace. Left front tire is removed. We're going to take these nuts off here to get this bracket out of the way. We're not even going to disconnect the track bar from this bracket because the bracket's coming out anyway, so there's no need in even messing with that. So it's going to come out with the bracket. So you got two nuts here, then you got a couple bolts on the inside of the frame. My sway bar links are not connected, or actually they're completely removed because something else I did with the lift. I bought quick disconnect sway bar links. That'll be in a different video. And of course, with weight on the axle and the spring pushed up, the spring is in the way of that nut right there. But take the tire off, put a jack stand on the frame, let the weight off of the axle. Should move out of the way where you can come straight onto that nut with an 18mm socket. Now you want to take these two bolts loose. They're both 18mm under the frame, the back side of the bracket, and hopefully this will come out. Thank you, Cotter Key. Now a couple things to watch out for is hardware. So the kit comes with a new bolt and nut that goes on the lower end, which attaches the track bar to the axle, and the upper end, which attaches the track bar to the frame. Comes with new hardware for that. If you look at this bolt, this is the bolt that was attached to the lower end, which attaches to the axle. It's got quite a bit of corrosion and it's not as thick as it was before. It's lost a lot of its diameter on the shank of the bolt. That could cause death wobble. This floating back and forth inside of that bracket can cause it. So you definitely want new hardware. This has a nice new shouldered area on it. Is a proper diameter. Now this is not necessarily going to cause death wobble because the bracket was tight, but I want to show you how bad these bolts are. Look at how corroded and how much of a shank has just eroded away with corrosion on that. That is definitely going to need new bolts. So I'm going to go out and get new bolts for this. These are the two bolts that went all the way up through the frame on the bottom of the track bar mount. The other ones look okay. Nuts look okay. So I'm good on that. Just going to replace these bolts. So now I've got the hardware I need. Time to see if we have any luck putting this on. So that all bolted up nicely. You gotta realize that the rough country track bar bracket is thicker than stock bracket, so you're not gonna have as much threads coming up through behind these bolts. So now when you torque the nuts to 74 foot-pounds and the bolts underneath to 92 foot-pounds. Now a little comparison between the rough country track bar and the stock one. You can see this end here completely different. This has kind of a ball joint type end on it. I can't really hold it too sturdy. You can just see that movement right there. That's something else that's going to cause death wobble. See the movement right in between this bracket and this track bar. Something you're supposed to keep greased up, which it's not, is dry. Most people don't grease that. Where now we just have an end with a bushing. This end, because of the curve, this is the end that's going to go around the differential for the front axle. And one end of the track bar that goes into the frame. That would be the end that had the curve in it. Lift it up and put it in the mount. Just like that. Now with the bolt on, put the nut on the back. And pick up this other end, set it in place and put the bolt in. And the way it sits is way too long, so we're going to adjust this in a little bit and do the final adjustment later. Now this track bar is good for an adjustment from 0 lift all the way up to a 6-inch lift. So what I did was I made sure it was turned in all the way to give myself the maximum amount of adjustment and to make sure the threads are even on both sides. So now with the tires back on, we want to locate this axle in the correct position. So what the track bar does, it stabilizes the axle, the front axle, when you're going down the road. But when you put a new track bar on it, especially one when you do a lift, it's going to locate the axle left and right, so you want it centered. So what I'm going to do is measure from the spring, coil spring inside here, all the way out to the edge of this tire tread and see what we got. This driver's side, we've got about 14 7/8. And the passenger side, we have about 14 1/8. So that means the axle is too far over to the driver's side. So what we're going to do is we're going to lengthen the track bar to push this tire out, which will bring the driver's side tire in. So what we're going to do is turn the track bar adjustment, barrel nut, whatever you want to call it. If you turn it this way, you see it's getting shorter. You want to turn it this direction. You can see we're gaining threads out here. That makes it longer. Now the adjustment's only about 3/8 of an inch. It's not that big of a deal. But I'm going to try to get as close as I possibly can. Now being by yourself, you can try to turn this to see if you can move the axle just by spinning this. What you're going to do is you're going to put tension on the axle down here, pushing against the frame up there. And it's going to try to push this axle over to the passenger side. So what I'm going to do, since I'm by myself, I'm going to turn it until it gets difficult to turn. Then I'm going to crank up the Jeep and I'm going to drive it forward a little bit and then drive it back a little bit. That'll ease the tension, push the axle over, and hopefully just over time I'll be able to get it moved over. Since I adjusted it as far in as it would go, you see how many threads there are. Plenty of threads to adjust it out some. And for the next few clips, I decided to leave the engine running so the audio is terrible. So to spare you from that, I decided to do a voiceover. After my adjustment, the driver's side was 14 9/16 and the passenger side was also 14 9/16. After you verify that your axle is centered, you want to tighten the 2 clamps around the adjustment barrel nut. And rough country does not give you a torque for that. So how tight do you want it? Tight enough to keep your adjustment from moving. And now, because of the new hardware and the new bushings on the new track bar, this end is very tight, the end that connects to the axle. And then the end that goes to the frame is also very tight. And that is another job complete on the Stanley Way XJ. I appreciate you watching. Thanks for coming along. I enjoyed working on the XJ with you. Thanks for watching. Join me next time as we tackle more issues with a 1999 XJ. See you real soon.